Chapter 293. Although Liu Beiyu and his guards have been beaten miserably, they're still only injured. In Muyan's hands, they're easily cured. Lowering his head and drinking a bowl of medicine, Liu Beiyu frowns. Just as he puts the bowl down, he sees a row of ink camp brawny men standing in front of his bed. Each and every one of them has a fiendish look, as if they're itching to skin him and dismember him. What are you guys doing? Liu Beiyu's voice unconsciously trembles. He's really scared from the beating just now. Just as he's bewildered, he hears the man who just gave him the first punch say in a gruff voice, "Speak, how are you going to punish us?" What are? If you don't punish us, the little master will definitely peel off a layer of our skin later. Seeing Liu Beiyu's stupefied look, Guan Hu gets even angrier. He looks at him from head to toe, sizing him up from left to right. The more he looks, the more upset he gets. With this weak chicken appearance, it would be strange if he could think that this person is the Mrs. Apprentice. You can't blame them for getting beaten up. Are you really the Mrs. Apprentice? The disdain in his tone is almost overflowing. As soon as Liu Beiyu hears this, he immediately explodes. Of course I'm Master's apprentice. This group of people can question his identity as a prince, but they can't question his relationship with his master and little brother. Guan Hu curls his lips and says, "With your weak chicken appearance, which part of you looks like the Mrs. Apprentice? Which part of you looks like the little master's apprentice?" Who would have thought that Liu Beiyu wouldn't feel the slightest bit ashamed or annoyed at being called a weak chicken? On the contrary, he's bold and confident. "I didn't learn martial arts from Master. What does my weakness have to do with whether I'm Master's apprentice or not? Not martial arts. Then what is it? Is it medicine?" Liu Beiyu has an inscrutable look on his face as he shakes his head. It's also not medicine. Is it alchemy? He continues to shake his head. This time, the people of the ink camp are really curious. In the end, what did you learn from the miss? Liu Beiyu shows a mysterious smile, then he has someone bring over a package from the side. He takes out a mounted scroll from inside. As the scroll slowly unfurls, the rough men of the ink camp see the vivid and lifelike drawing on it, and then everyone is petrified. This, what is this? Guan Hu used his coarse and wild voice, like a duck's quack, to forcibly let out a eunuch's shrill cry. The other people from the ink camp are also dumbstruck, their expressions lifeless. This scene was simply too hard to accept. In the painting was a 7-foot-tall man like them, but he was wearing light muslin and had a drunken and enchanting posture. The scene was still very beautiful. The 7-foot-tall man's face was hazy, but his posture was the perfect combination of gentleness and strength. The entire picture was vivid and lifelike, as if it was about to leap out of the paper. It was so goddamn lifelike. Guan Hu looks sluggishly at Liu Beiyu. You said you learned it from Miss, that's it." Liu Beiyu's face was full of admiration and awe. "Master's painting skills are much better than mine. Initially, when he gave me several paintings of beauties for my personal bodyguards, each one seemed to have a soul. Although I've been diligently practicing during this time, I still couldn't learn even 1/10 of Master's skill." Suddenly, his voice pauses. His gaze looks up and down at Guan Hu and the others, the light in his eyes getting brighter and brighter. Chapter 294. There's an ominous premonition in his heart. It's like a runaway wild horse. Sure enough, the next moment, Liu Beiyu claps his hands and says excitedly, "Didn't you just say that you want me to punish you? There's no need for punishment. Each of you will be my model for a day. Just like my guards, take off your clothes and pose in all kinds of poses. I promise, it'll be very easy. I draw very fast." Guan Hu feels cold sweat dripping down from his head. He takes a step back, then another. "Hey, still not necessary. We'd better obediently accept the miss and the little master's punishment." Saying that, the group of people look at Liu Beiyu like they've seen a ghost. They break into a run. Who knew that at this time, Muyan's clear and melodious voice could be heard from behind? "I actually think that this punishment method is pretty good." Crack. Guan Hu's figure suddenly freezes. The fine and dense cold sweat turns into a waterfall of sweat. He struggles on his deathbed. "Little master, we are willing to accept the hellish training." Right. We're willing to accept the hellish training. Xiao Bao expressionlessly looks at them, then he coldly says, if Nyang Qin says it's not bad, then it's not bad. Oh, don't help. Amidst ghostly wails and wolf-like howls, the 7 or 8 people from the ink camp who had bullied Liu Beiyu and his guards are all stripped of their clothes. Only some enchanting ornaments are left to cover the important parts of their bodies. There's a pink scarf. There's a red maple leaf. There's even a shell inlaid with pearls, specifically covering the 3 key points. Yang Haotian violently suppresses Guan Hu and the others who want to resist. Turning around, he finds Feng Haitang standing by Muyan's side, staring fixedly at this scene. His eyes, which had always been cold and indifferent, surged with an amused smile. Just like a child, curious and naive. Yang Haotian hasn't seen such a lively Feng Haitang for a long time. Since their reunion, Yang Haotian has refused to be together with Feng Haitang, causing her reticent face to almost completely lose its smile. Seeing this scene, Yang Haotian should be gratified and happy. However, Feng Haitang's eyes were almost glued to those naked men. However, Yang Haotian could not help but feel a burst of anger in his heart. Almost without thinking, he stepped forward and covered Feng Haitang's eyes, dragging her out. Feng Haitang was stunned and wanted to resist. When she found out that the person pulling her was Yang Haotian, the corners of her mouth immediately hooked up into a gentle smile. She obediently followed him and left. Feng Haitang and Yang Haotian's departure did not affect the painting process in the slightest. Guan Hu and the others looked as if they had lost their parents, wishing that they could bang their heads against the wall and die. If they had known that they would end up like this after beating up that weakling, they would definitely not have touched a single hair on that weakling's head. Seeing Yang Haotian leave, Guan Hu rolled his eyes, wanting to sneak away. But before he could take a step, he hears Muyan's beaming voice. I think Guan Hu, you seem to be wearing too many clothes. Why don't you take off the black veil as well? Don't. Guan Hu almost kneels down in front of this grandaunt. I won't run anymore. The other people in the ink camp who haven't been punished don't care about his wailing. One by one, they come over, laughing and giggling. They tear off the veil on his body, letting his majestic body be completely revealed before everyone. Chapter 295. Good. It really has a great feeling. Master, they're really worthy of being your people. They're even more majestic than the guards in the imperial palace. Quickly pose yourselves, I'm going to paint. As he speaks, he lifts his brush. But after a few strokes, he slightly frowns. I feel that something's not right. They seem to be lacking a more explosive core, don't you think so, Master? Muyan nods, expressing her approval. This disciple of hers isn't very good at martial arts, but his talent in painting is excellent. As soon as Liu Beiyu sees that Muyan approves, a pair of bright eyes immediately turn towards the other ink camp members. Coming into contact with his line of sight, those ink camp people who were still taking pleasure in other people's misfortune suddenly turn aghast. They can't wait to break into a run. However, under Muyan's beaming gaze, each and every one of these people's legs tremble, and they don't dare to budge. Sob. Miss, please spare us. We didn't do anything wrong. Right. We didn't do anything wrong. We don't need to accept punishment, right? Liu Beiyu says with an excited face. You're dedicating yourself to art, how can you say that it's a punishment? Master, don't you think so? Muyan curls up the corners of her lips, smiling like a flower. Her whole face is as bright as the sun, and as bright as the moon. Miss Suddenly, a deep voice rings out from behind her. Chang Yu slowly walks in front of her, kneels down on one knee, and slightly bows his head. This subordinate is willing to paint. In an instant, the whole audience goes silent. The ink camp people blink, and then they pick their ears, but they still feel that it's inconceivable. Could it be that their ink camp's most outstanding elite, Chang Yu, is stupid? But Chang Yu doesn't pay attention to anyone's reaction. He stands up, and neatly takes off his clothes and pants, revealing a lean and slender body, tall and clean. Chang Yu's face is covered with scars, rough and ugly, but what's strange is that his figure is exceptionally good. The skin on his body is also smooth and tight, revealing a sexy honey-colored hue. Even someone as calm as Muyan is also somewhat dumbfounded. What kind of development is this? Good, good, good. That's great. This is the fulcrum I want, the one and only core. Lu Beiyu excitedly jumps up from his seat. With trembling hands, she took a piece of black cloth and tied it around his waist. Chang Yu was pushed to the center of the 8 people, putting on a drunken and confused posture. But this posture, coupled with his slender waist and long legs, had an inexplicable charm that made one's blood boil. Guan Hu and the others, who were originally scattered like sand, under the guidance of his imposing manner, seemed to have fused into a whole. Looking at it quietly, every detail was illustrating the true meaning of strength and beauty. Mu Yang withdraws her astonished expression from a moment ago. Her admiring gaze sweeps over the scene, and finally falls on Chang Yu. It was indeed a scene so beautiful that it made one's soul tremble. Since she can become Lu Beiyu's master, her attainments in painting are naturally very high. Therefore, he knew better than anyone how shocked and touched the painter was by this seemingly shameful scene. Moreover, under such shock, she faintly comprehended something in her heart. Her cultivation that had been stagnant for a long time seemed to loosen. Mu Yang looks at this scene attentively, looking at Chang Yu, who is the fulcrum. However, he didn't notice that Chang Yu's slightly drooping eyelashes were trembling slightly. Chapter 296. He clearly knows that he doesn't have the qualifications to think about the person in front of him. However, his reason can't control his heart. He can't restrain his surging emotions. He doesn't know when it started, but Chang Yu's gaze can't help but fall on the miss, blazing, longing, loving, but also enduring. When the miss's eyes look at Guan Hu and the others' naked bodies, he wishes that those shimmering eyes were looking at him. So, he does it. Without any sense of shame, he takes off his own clothes and becomes Lu Beiyu's model. He only hopes that that person's gaze can stay on him, even for a moment. When those watery peach blossom eyes lazily look over and fall on his bare skin, Chang Yu almost uses all the strength in his body to suppress the trembling of his body and the redness of his skin. The skin that person is looking at seems to be burning with fire. It's burning and sweet. This is his happiest moment. But it's also his only happy moment. He can't let the miss find out about his filthy feelings. Otherwise, he won't even have the chance to stay by the miss's side. Bang! A loud noise comes from the roof, and gravel falls down in a swirl. It's followed by a gust of wind mixed with endless anger. Not far away, Chang Yu and the others are directly thrown to the ground. The furniture in the room fell down with a clatter, covering them securely. Especially Chang Yu, he's directly knocked into the corner by that gust of wind. He spits out a mouthful of blood and faints. Enchanting. Xiao Bao wakes up from this unforeseen event and wants to pull Muyan's hand. But without waiting for him to move, Muyan has already disappeared from where she stood. She's firmly imprisoned in an embrace. There's a blazing, almost explosive breath, and a man's hoarse and angry voice, ringing with a fury that can tear people apart. Jun Muyan, you're mine. Dust sprinkles down, making people unable to see the person's appearance clearly. They can only vaguely see a silhouette. But Xiao Bao is the first to react. Lecher, let go of my Enchantress. As he says that, his small figure rushes out like a cannonball, wanting to snatch Muyan back. However, the expected impact of fist and flesh doesn't happen. When the dust settled, the figure of the man and his mother, who were still in the same place, disappeared without a trace. Xiao Bao stood stiffly in place, his face as cold as frost, and his eyes spitting fire. Little master, what happened? The ink camp guard on the side, still conscious, asks while trembling with fear, is it someone from Xian Medical Pavilion? Did they kidnap the young miss? Xiao Bao gritted his teeth and slowly shook his head. Taking a deep breath, he spat out a few words. Mother, I'm fine. The one who captured Enchantress was that lecher, so of course Enchantress would be fine, but, that bastard actually took his mother away from him. Bastard. Rogue. Rascal. Don't think that Enchantress is yours, don't think that I can't find you. I will definitely snatch my mother back. Mu Yang woke up to the rumbling of her stomach. His nose was filled with the fragrance of food. Rubbing her stomach, She sat up and looked around. He discovered that he was in a woman's bedroom that was decorated elegantly and gently. Although it was a bedroom, there were delicious dishes on the table not far away. Moreover, those dishes were still steaming hot. One look and it would make people's fingers move. Chapter 297. Mu Yang quickly jumps down from the bed. She casually washes her hands with the water in the basin on the side and wipes her face. He immediately sat at the table and began to eat heartily. His attitude was quite carefree. He didn't even care where he was right now. As soon as the food enters her mouth, Mu Yan suddenly widens her eyes, revealing an amazed expression. So delicious. It was several times more delicious than the expensive food she had eaten in big restaurants. He didn't know which chef made it, but he actually had such a high level of cooking. Oh, I really want to kidnap him back and make him cook for me. After eating and drinking to her heart's content, Mu Yang stretches with satisfaction. He patted the non-existent dust off his clothes and got up to leave. When she opened the door, she realized that she was in a huge courtyard. There was the fragrance of flowers and the singing of birds in the yard. There's also a very large area that has been reclaimed as a ridge, with a lot of drafts and herbs planted on it. Every one of them is exceptionally rare, and there are even some that Mu Yang has never seen before. However, she did not intend to stay in this unfamiliar place for long. She was afraid that if she returned late, Xiaobao would be worried. "Where do you think you're going?" A deep, husky voice suddenly came from behind. Mu Yan's figure pauses, but she doesn't turn around. Instead, she leaps up. His body was like a nimble swallow as he leaped onto the wall of the courtyard. Once she crossed the wall, she would be out of the yard. Mingju didn't expect that this woman clearly knows that it's him, and even heard his voice. She didn't even turn around to look at him. Instead, he ran away. Did she really hate and despise him that much? When he thought of this, the anger in his heart surged along with the burning and tearing pain. In an instant, his eyes burned red. Mu Yan lightly steps on the wall with one foot, and her figure flies away like a bird. Suddenly, an irresistible force tugged at her waist. He actually forcefully dragged her back. Bang! The wooden door slammed against the doorframe, and the whole room seemed to tremble. Mu Yang's body is firmly pressed against the door, her hands pressed on both sides, unable to move even a little bit. The man looked down at her. The dim light in the room made the man's face look a little hazy. But no matter how hazy it was, it couldn't hide the man's almost perfect and handsome face. And that pair of eyes that seemed to be spitting fire were glaring at her, as if he couldn't wait to swallow her whole. Mu Yan swallows with difficulty. Mingju, calm down. Calm down. Tell me, you want to run away from me? Why do you want to go back? The man bent down, his hot breath on her face. A faint blush quickly appeared on the young girl's fair skin, causing her already beautiful face to appear even more alluring. Mingju's eyes suddenly deepen. His gaze lingered on the plump lips that were bright red from a good sleep and a good meal. Her slightly upturned cherry lips were like the stamens of a flower waiting to be picked. Her faintly discernible pearly white teeth seemed to be waiting for him to lick and occupy them over and over again, declaring his ownership. Mingju, you, then, without waiting for the woman in his arms to finish, he did it. For so many days, he had been thinking about it, longing for it, but was unable to vent his desire. His scorching lips captured the girl's soft cherry lips. The domineering and invasive aura swallowed all of her breaths. The hand that was originally imprisoning Mu Yan's body pushes her into his embrace. Chapter 298. Mu Yang originally still wants to resist. However, her nose is filled with the man's mellow and sexy scent. Her breath is plundered, her lips and teeth are violated. For a moment, her mind is muddled, and her body feels like it's being set on fire. Her body is soft like it's turned into water. Only by relying on the man's imprisonment can she not collapse. But an absurd idea inexplicably emerges in her mind. This man, when they first met, his kissing skills were clearly very unskilled to death. In just a few short months, how did he train? He actually kissed her until she was confused and intoxicated. She doesn't know how much time has passed. Mingju reluctantly releases those already red and swollen lips, and lightly pecks a few times on the moist corner of her lips. These days, have you, missed Benjun? The man's dark and husky voice is filled with strong lust, but also with infinite expectations. Ah! Mu Yang is silent for a moment. If she says that she basically hasn't missed him, will she be beaten to death? Sure enough, she just keeps silent. Mingju's face immediately turns as black as the bottom of a pot. His fingers firmly grip her chin, gnashing his teeth as he says, "You heartless woman." Mu Yang almost can't help but roll her eyes. "Who are you to this Miss R? Why would I miss you?" Mingju really wants to ruthlessly teach this person a lesson. But when he sees that snow-like complexion, and that pair of watery eyes that are as beautiful as the bright moon in the water, he can't bring himself to do it. This woman, she was born to be his nemesis. Mu Yang straightens her clothes that were a little messy from the passion just now. "I've been out for long enough, I should go back." Mingju's eyes suddenly surge with a strong murderous intent and anger. "Go back? What do you want to go back for? To fool around with those disheveled wild men?" The man's voice is hoarse and gloomy, like he's suppressing a volcano that's about to erupt. There's even a trace of imperceptible grievance. Mu Yang also doesn't know why. Being stared at by such a pair of eyes, being questioned by such a voice, she unexpectedly feels a little guilty. Cough. "How can you say that I'm fooling around?" She laughs dryly. "Don't you see that I'm teaching my apprentice how to paint? A man's robust and stalwart body is the most perfect work of art, worthy to be recorded. How can you think so dirty? The most perfect work of art. Is it worth being recorded?" The man's good-looking eyebrows slowly raised. His eyebrows slanted into his temples, showing off the man's unparalleled domineering aura. But his actions make Mu Yan dumbfounded. The man grabbed her hand and pressed it against his chest. His husky voice carried a hint of sexiness. "Then, does Mu Yang want to record my body?" The front of the man's shirt had been ripped open, revealing his firm chest muscles. Mu Yang's little hand was grabbed and pressed against that skin. The scalding temperature almost made her scream and run away. She's obviously looking at those naked people from the ink camp with relish. There was nothing to be shy about. But looking at this man's body, and even using a brush to record it, Mu Yan's cheeks are so red that they could drip water. But Mingju has already grabbed her hand, unbuttoning his clothes. His coat slipped off, leaving his shirt open. This time, it wasn't just his sexy chest that was exposed, but also his perfect abs and waistline. The man's aura was disdainful, his figure tall and slender. Chapter 299. He looked skinny with clothes on, but muscular without clothes. She had a slim waist and long legs, coupled with a charming face. This man was simply a monster. Mingju grabs her hand and presses it against the waist of his trousers. His voice is unbelievably hoarse. "Didn't Mu Yan say that she wanted a perfect record? Benjun's body has yet to be completely revealed to you. Really? What a monster." Mu Yan's whole body is red, and her nose is still a little itchy and hot. She didn't dare to look below the man's waist. He forced a smile and said, I don't need to paint. Did you prepare the food? Does it taste good? Which restaurant did you order it from? I'll also bring xiaobao there next time." Mingju pauses. He narrows his eyes and looks at her with an unreadable expression, like? "I like it." Mu Yang nodded without hesitation. "It's much better than what my family's chef makes. It would be great if he could eat it every day. No matter how expensive it is, I'll accept it." She doesn't know why, but Mu Yang feels that after she says those words, the man seemed to be in a much better mood. The coldness in his eyes seemed to melt away. "Your wish will come true. So which restaurant is it? If you don't tell me the name of the restaurant, how can I fulfill my wish? Or was it made by your private kitchen?" Mu Yang licked her lips, her face drooling. "Then can you lend it to me for 2 days?" She had to let xiaobao have a taste of such delicious food. The man lowered his head and moved closer to her, his hot breath landing on the lips she had just licked. The young girl's lips were still red and swollen, recounting how he had bullied her and how sweet it felt. And right now, Mingju only wants to bully him again. Mu Yang's breathing suddenly becomes a little chaotic, and she quickly takes a step back. Can't I borrow it for 2 days? How about 1 day? Di Mingju takes a deep breath, suppressing the surging desire in his heart. He slowly says, you can borrow it for a lifetime. Mu Yang's eyes widen. However, before her smile could surface in those pair of beautiful peach blossom eyes, the man said in a deep voice, but not now. Muyan thinks that Di Mingju is still reluctant to part with this private kitchen. So he smiled lazily and said, it doesn't matter. For the sake of delicious food, I can wait. Since there's nothing else, I'll be leaving first. However, before he could take a step forward, the man's figure was like a phantom, suddenly teleporting in front of her. His eyes, which had just been tinged with a trace of warmth, were now gloomy again. Who said you can leave? Mu Yang raises an eyebrow. Then what do you want to do? You want me to warm your bed? However, with Jun Shong's looks, there should be many women who want to warm your bed. Jun. Mu. Yang. Di Mingju is finally at the end of his patience, almost shouting out her name. You left without saying goodbye. You didn't even leave a single word. You disappeared without a trace right before my eyes. Now you're asking me what I want. Jun Muyan, don't you have a heart? Her arm was suddenly grabbed and the man's fiery eyes were right in front of her. His eyes were filled with crazy longing, hatred, and jealousy. It was fine if this woman left without saying goodbye. It was fine if she never missed him. She actually went to look at other men's naked bodies. Heaven knows that when Di Mingju saw that scene, the immortal force within his body almost couldn't be controlled and exploded, almost destroying the entire Yenwu continent. Chapter 300. In the face of such questioning and anger, Muyan's expression is somewhat muddled. She raises her brows after a long while, and slowly asks, didn't you leave without saying goodbye first? Di Mingju's gaze suddenly congeals. These words reverberate in his mind for a long time before he understands what they mean. No. He still doesn't understand. When did Ben Jun leave without saying goodbye? Mu Yang blinks her eyes. One night, I entered your courtyard, but it was empty, and the dust had piled up high. There was no news of you for a month. Could it be that you didn't leave without saying goodbye? Di Mingju's expression turns sluggish for a moment, then he gnashes his teeth in a fury that could swallow a person alive. Han Yi. If Han Yi were in front of him right now, Di Mingju swears that he would tear him into 18 pieces, and chop each piece to feed to the dogs. The burning anger slowly extinguishes. What comes after is an inexplicable ecstasy. So, you left because I left without saying goodbye? Di Mingju asks softly. Muyan thinks, you're thinking too much. I came to see my father and brother when I left. But when she meets the man's expectant eyes, she doesn't know why those words get stuck in her throat, and she can't say them no matter what. He's obviously the dignified Jun Shong, and his status is certainly high and unparalleled. But he shows an expression like a child longing for candy, making people want to dote on him. Muyan coughs lightly. In short, the misunderstanding has been cleared up, so I can go back. No. Di Mingju's face darkens when it comes to this issue. Saying that he left without saying goodbye and was sad, I didn't. It's all a lie. He just wants to go back and hang around with those wild men. Muyan is speechless. Then what do you want? Just lock me up like this. Di Mingju's eyes are deep. If I could, I really want to lock you up by my side like this for a lifetime. But he doesn't say what's in his heart. Instead, he flips his wrist, and 7 dark beads appear in his palm. These 7 beads are quite strange. They actually emit a faint medicinal and earthy fragrance. These are the seeds of the dark cloud spirit flower. Di Mingju slowly says. Hearing the 3 words dark cloud spirit flower, Mu Yang's pupils shrank. The dark cloud spirit flower was actually the seed of the dark cloud spirit flower. The dark cloud spirit flower was a type of medicinal herb. But in the Yenwu continent, it's practically extinct. Even in the records, no one has ever seen the dark cloud spirit flower, let alone know what it's used for. And the reason why Muyan knows about the dark cloud spirit flower is because she had read about it in the Supreme Draft records that Xiaobao found. One of the prescriptions for a supreme draft requires the dark cloud spirit flower. And because of the uniqueness of the dark cloud spirit flower, there were detailed records of it. The dark cloud spirit flower only had a lifespan of 7 days from germination to flowering and wilting. Therefore, it was also known as the 7-day flower. However, this 7 days flower had not been cultivated for thousands of years. Not to mention the Yenwu continent, even in the Xiuzhen continent, it's been a very, very long time since anyone was able to grow this dark cloud spirit flower. Mu Yang looks at Di Mingju, not understanding why he would take out the seed of the dark cloud spirit flower. Just as she was feeling suspicious, she heard the man's deep and magnetic voice, which was slightly husky and sexy, ring in her ears. As long as you can cultivate a dark cloud spirit flower, and use this jade box to collect the stamens, I will let you go. Saying that, he puts the 7 seeds together with the jade box into her hands. Chapter 301. Muyan's eyes widen. What do you want me to cultivate? Dark cloud's spirit flower. Do you know that for thousands of years, no one has ever cultivated a dark cloud spirit flower? The way of nature. Muyan glares at the indifferent and calm man. Then why do you want me to cultivate a dark cloud spirit flower? No one has done it for thousands of years. What makes you think that I can do it? As soon as her voice falls, the man's hand wraps around her waist, bringing her into his embrace. If you can't do it, then you can only stay by Ben Jun's side forever. Don't even think about leaving. Muyan's brows wrinkle. Are you playing with me? Warm lips fall, and the man's next words inexplicably extinguish the anger that surges in her heart. I'm not playing with you, I believe. He lowers his head and presses it against her exquisite earlobe, as if he wants to hold it in his mouth, and as if he's only lightly touching it. Even if no one in the world can do it, I believe that my Muyan can do it. Low and hoarse words, but like a feather. It gently tugs at her heartstrings. Muyan steadies her mind, and inwardly says that she can't fall for the honey trap. She looks at the seeds of the dark cloud spirit flower in her hand, and thinks to herself, perhaps Di Mingju needs these seeds, so he's looking for her help? In any case, she still owes him a few favors. There's no harm in giving it a try. What's more, she's also quite interested in the legendary dark cloud spirit flower. I can try to cultivate the dark cloud spirit flower. Muyan looks up at Di Mingju, but I won't stay here. Xiao Bao is still waiting for me at home. You can come back after 7 days to get the dark cloud spirit flower. Unexpectedly, Di Mingju shakes his head. You must stay here and cultivate the dark cloud spirit flower. You can't be distracted by anything. Muyan frowns. Without me, Xiao Bao will have nightmares at night. Humph. Di Mingju coldly snorts, revealing a dissatisfied expression. A real man still needs to stick to people to sleep. What a scandal. Hearing him criticize her son, Muyan is unhappy. What real man? My son is only 4 years old. A 4-year-old child likes to nestle in his mother's arms and act spoiled. Isn't that normal? What's more, her baby was so obedient. Other than the fact that he liked to stick to her and sleep, he wasn't willful at all. When you were 4 years old, who knows where you were playing with mud? What right do you have to criticize my Xiaobao? He actually dared to say that her son was behaving improperly. Di Mingju faintly looks over. When Ben Jun was 3 years old, he had already been thrown into the deep mountains to train alone for 3 months. Tell me, what right do you have to say that? Ah! Mu Yang is suddenly at a loss for words. However, his gaze was a little erratic. At the age of 3, he was thrown into the deep mountains to train alone. Although her baby also grew up deep in the mountains, it had been training alone for 3 months. She absolutely couldn't bear to see Xiaobao suffer like this. Could it be that this man's parents were willing to let him go? How would a 3-year-old child struggle and suffer in the deep mountains to come out alive? An unfamiliar emotion welled up in her heart. She seemed to feel sorry for this seemingly invincible man in front of her. But he hears Di Mingju continue to say, Xiao Bao will be Ben Jun's son in the future, and also the future master of the polar domain. If he doesn't even have this bit of responsibility, how can he be qualified? The corner of Mu Yang's mouth twitches. His heartache was nothing more than fleeting clouds. What do you mean Xiao Bao will be your son? Chapter 302. This confident tone, it's as if she must marry him no matter what. Can this man be even more overbearing? Mu Yang grits her teeth. The one I like is Xiao Bao's biological father. I won't marry anyone but him. Just give up on this idea. In any case, the tiger flag of Xiao Bao's biological father has already been raised. She doesn't mind using it a bit more thoroughly. Sure enough, hearing this sentence, Ming Ju's eyes sink. The air in the room seems to be a bit gloomy. Seeing Mu Yang in the same room with a half-naked wild man, Ming Ju would only be burning with pure jealousy. But every time he mentions Xiao Bao's biological father, it's as if someone has ruthlessly slashed his heart. He can't breathe due to the pain. That's because Ming Ju knows that those naked men, no matter how close they are to Mu Yang, they still haven't entered her heart. As Mu Yang said, in her eyes, those men are just works of art. However, Xiao Bao's father has truly participated in Mu Yang's life. They even have a life crystal. Just by looking at how much Mu Yang loves Xiao Bao, he can imagine how much she loves Xiao Bao's father. What kind of sweet past do the two of them have? And that past is something that he can never participate in. Thinking of this, Ming Ju feels a suffocating pain. He hates himself for not looking for the woman of destiny in the prophecy earlier. If he had found Mu Yang 5 years earlier, could he have completely owned this woman? Could he have become the only one in Mu Yang's life? The man's departing figure seems indescribably lonely and desolate. It makes Mu Yang's heart feel slightly sour. However, when she comes back to her senses, that little bit of sourness completely turns into anger. Bastard Ming Ju. He actually really locked her up. The sky has already darkened. Junji Medical Center, inside Mu Yang's room, the lights are still dimly lit. Little master, do you want me to sleep with you? Feng Haitang looks at the little boy in front of her, who is carved from jade, but has a cold face. She can't help but open her mouth to ask. Xiao Bao shakes his head, his handsome little face still expressionless. You go rest. Feng Haitang nods, but she still can't help but look at him worriedly. Ever since she followed the miss, Feng Haitang's daily task was to take care of Mu Yang and Xiao Bao's daily needs. She had a cold temperament and was not good with words, but her admiration and gratitude towards Mu Yang grew with each passing day. Only after following by Mu Yang's side did she realize that this young girl, who was even younger than herself, had superb medical skills. If Mu Yan hadn't treated Yang Haotian's injuries back then now, not to mention regaining his former cultivation, even surviving would be extremely difficult. And during this time, the ink camp's people might have to go all out to fight for the special drafts. But towards her, Yang Haotian, Yu Yang and the others, Mu Yang wasn't the slightest bit stingy. Those special grade drafts that people scramble over outside, to them, are just candy that they can casually eat. Feng Haitang's heart is filled with gratitude towards Mu Yang, so she looks after the little master even more attentively. The young master in front of him could be said to be the most outstanding, and sensible child in the world. Other 4-year-old children might be acting like a spoiled child and rolling on the ground. But he was already so sensible that it made one's heart ache. The hard work and seriousness of his daily cultivation made her, an adult, feel ashamed of her inferiority. Chapter 303. He grew up without a father. That's why such a young child has to learn to be strong, to constantly work hard, to use his tender hands to protect his mother. He hadn't felt it when the young miss was around, but now that the young miss had disappeared, this child was left alone. Although little master didn't show it on his face. However, Feng Haitang felt that in such a big room, the small figure seemed so fragile and lonely. It made people want to give him the best of everything in the world. Feng Haitang still wanted to speak, but was interrupted by Yang Haotian, who brought her out of the room. The candlelight was still flickering in the room, and the window paper reflected the frail figure of the child, making it look so pitiful. Feng Haitang couldn't help but tighten her grip on Yang Haotian's hand and softly said, Haotian, it would be great if our children in the future were half as sensible and smart as little master. When Yang Haotian heard this, the light in his eyes dimmed. He forcefully let go of Feng Haitang's hand and expressionlessly shook his head at her. He turned around and left. Haotian. Feng Haitang couldn't bear it anymore. She walked in front of him and stared at him. Her expression was stubborn, but her eyes were slightly red. Yang Haotian, how long do you want to run away? Don't tell me you still don't understand my feelings. Don't you believe me? Haven't we wasted enough time? She takes a step forward and grabs the man's hand. Her usually cold and elegant face, at this moment, reveals a deep and painful attachment. Haotian, I beg you, don't push me away again, don't pretend to not see me, okay? Yang Haotian closed his eyes. He did not dare to look at that face. The face was too young, too beautiful. She deserves the best man, and she deserves a better future. Not wasting time on an ugly man who was already crippled and had no future. Yang Haotian broke free from her hand and slowly drew out the words he wanted to say. Don't say any more. I'm not good enough for you. It's impossible for us. He only started to learn sign language after he started following Mu Yang. He learns very quickly, and it's also very easy for him to communicate with the miss, the little master, and the people from the ink camp. Even if he still couldn't speak, he could still live like an ordinary person. However, this was not enough. From then on, he could no longer call out Haitang's name. He could no longer comfort her when she was sad or laugh with her when she was happy. How could someone like him be worthy of the woman in front of him? Whether I'm worthy or not is up to me, not you. Feng Haitang grabbed his sleeve excitedly and couldn't help raising her voice. You obviously like me, and I like you too. We love each other. Miss and little master, everyone around us will bless us. Why? Why did you have to be so cruel and push me away? Yang Haotian's hand trembled, and then he wrote another sentence. You will find a man who is 1,000 times better than me. But I don't want any of those men. I only want you. Feng Haitang's voice trembled. She reached out and hugged him tightly. Yang Haotian, don't you understand? I, Feng Haitang, will only love you in this life. In my eyes, no other man can compare to you. Yang Haotian's body stiffened. He used all the strength in his body to stop himself from pulling her into his arms. Chapter 304. I'm just a waste, what can I bring you? Yang Haotian raises his head and closes his eyes, preventing the sourness from overflowing. When he opened his eyes again, his face had already regained its frosty decisiveness. His hand steadily lifts to his chest, gesturing what he wants to say. Feng Haitang, do you really want me to say it so clearly? I don't like you anymore. When your Feng family hit me when I was down, when I was at my lowest, when I broke off the engagement with you, I already didn't love you. When I see you, I will think of my miserable and destitute past. I hope you will never appear in front of me again. Do you understand? Feng Haitang suddenly freezes in place, her face turning pale inch by inch. Her voice becomes weak and trembling. Haotian, you're lying to me with these words, aren't you? You just want me to give up, right? Say whatever you want. Yang Haotian is still expressionless, gesturing against his will, but it's impossible for me to be with you. I hope you won't pester me again. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for me to do things in front of Miss. After saying that, he turns around and leaves without looking at Feng Haitang. She can no longer hold back her tears, and they fall from Feng Haitang's eyes. Sad weeping overflows from between her lips and teeth. That's why she didn't notice that the man walking in front of her turns around and looks at her. What kind of pain, desire, guilt, affection, but also a heart-wrenching despair. After Feng Haitang leaves, Xiao Bao sits in a daze under the candlelight for a while. Then he clenches his small fists, climbs down from the chair, and jumps onto the bed. The internal force in his body revolves. He wants to start cultivating. For the whole night, he doesn't sleep. He has to desperately become stronger, so that he can snatch his mother back. But with this level of cultivation, you will never be able to surpass me. A deep male voice rings in the room, making Xiao Bao jerk his head up. Then, he saw that annoying man, that lecher who snatched Nyangqin away. Give me back my mother. The small body shoots out like a cannonball, powerful internal force forming a whirlpool, its momentum majestic. However, the next moment, with a puff, all the internal force is like a punctured balloon, disappearing without a trace. Di Mingju is holding Xiao Bao in his hand. She grabbed him by the collar as if she was grabbing a monkey. Ming-ju looks at him expressionlessly. As I said, wanting to surpass Ben Jun at this level is nothing but an idiot's ravings. Let me go. Xiao Bao struggled with all his might, but he couldn't break free from the man's grasp. Bastard, give me back my mother. Ming-ju sneers, there's a trace of contempt in his eyes. You say that you want to become strong to protect your mother, but in fact, you'll only rely on her, stick to her, distract her for you, and forever be unable to break through the shackles and move forward. Xiao Bao was taken aback, and his small body stopped struggling. A trace of confusion and grievance appeared in her big blue eyes. I didn't. He didn't let his mother be distracted by him, he didn't let his mother be unable to move forward because of him. However, was there really no such thing? All these years, his mother had spent far more time on him than she had on herself. His mother's cultivation had clearly stagnated at the middle pre-celestial stage, unable to advance even an inch. However, she doesn't care at all. Instead, she practices the zither every day, refines drafts, and thinks of ways to make him break through steadily. He didn't share his mother's worries, he didn't protect her. Chapter 305. Her blue eyes were slowly covered with a layer of mist, and her small body curled up, looking indescribably aggrieved and sad. Ming-ju looks at the little boy's appearance in front of him, his heart inexplicably stifling, irritated and uncomfortable. You're a man. What's there to cry about? He stretched out his hand and clumsily and roughly wiped away the tears on Xiao Bao's face. Then, he casually sat on a chair at the side and placed Xiao Bao on his lap. All right, don't cry. In the future, don't stick to your mother anymore. If you want to become strong, Ben Jun can teach you. Xiao Bao's long eyelashes were like crow feathers, and they were wet with tears. Gently trembling, he lifts his head, revealing a pair of blue eyes that are exactly the same as Ming-ju's. He looked at the man who was holding him. She felt that this lecher, whom she usually hated, was a little different today. His embrace was very warm and had the same feeling as the father in her dreams. Why do you want to teach me? Ming-ju frowns as he looks at the food on the table. It was so cold that it was hard to swallow. How could a child eat this? With a wave of his hand, the food on the table disappeared. Then, he replaced it with a few bowls of fragrant, steaming hot dishes that whet one's appetite. Eat first. Ming-ju says coldly. It seemed to be an order, but for the first time, Xiao Bao didn't argue with him. Instead, he picked up the bowl and chopsticks. She just sat in the man's pocket, using chopsticks to eat. The fragrant food entered his stomach along with the heat, and his body became warm. The loneliness, fear, and bitterness of being alone in the house just now had all disappeared without a trace at this moment. Ming-ju waits until he's finished eating, then says, I can teach you martial skills, and even teach you to practice the cultivation method that surpasses the limits of Yanwu continent. Xiao Bao put down his bowl and chopsticks and burped. Her small, jade-like face was bright red from embarrassment. However, he quickly pulled a long face and asked, what are you trying to do? Plot. Ming-ju snorts coldly, Muyan will become Ben Jun's wife sooner or later, and you will be Ben Jun's son, the future lord of the polar domain. This monarch naturally has to nurture you well. Otherwise, don't tell me you're going to throw this monarch's face. Xiao Bao's face immediately flushed red, and he said angrily, Mother is not yours. So you're saying that you don't want to learn from me? Little Treasure's expression changed. His long eyelashes trembled slightly, showing that he was conflicted. Finally, he clenched his small fist and said loudly, Okay, I'll learn from you. But I will definitely find Nyangqin on my own and snatch her back. Saying that, he even shook his little fist. Nyangqin is mine, absolutely. Absolutely. I won't give it to you. Mu Yang stayed in the room for a while and found that the door couldn't be opened. The lock was even weirder. Even if she used all of her cultivation, she still couldn't move it at all. Mu Yang had no choice but to go back to bed and sleep. Early the next morning, someone delivered toiletries and breakfast. What made her regret was that the chef for breakfast today seemed to have changed. It wasn't as good as last night's dinner. Mu Yang stretches herself and gets up to walk out the door. As soon as she stepped out of the room, a pair of hands blocked her way. A black-robed youth appeared in front of him. He had a handsome face, red lips, and white teeth, but there was no expression on his face. It's even colder than Defying. Chapter 306. Muyan hooks up her lips, but Defying told me to plant the dark cloud spirit flower. Could it be that the seeds of the dark cloud spirit flower will blossom if I'm in the room? The young man hesitated for a moment and finally stepped aside. Muyan swaggers out of the room and arrives in front of the medicine field in the courtyard. After thinking for a bit, she took out 2 dark cloud spirit flower seeds and buried them in the ground. According to the records of the Supreme Drafts, if the dark cloud spirit flower is alive, you only need to wait for 6 hours. The seeds will show signs of breaking through the soil. Time passed slowly. Soon, the sun turned from the east to the west, from the scorching sun to the setting sun. However, the seeds buried in the soil did not show any signs of germination. Muyan frowns, and takes out a bottle of draft from the space that's specifically used to cultivate medicinal plants. He poured a few drops on the place where the seeds were buried. However, he probed it with his Shen energy. The seeds in the soil don't have the slightest bit of vitality. On the contrary, one of them, after coming into contact with the draft, seems to be corroded, and the mysterious energy contained inside also slowly disappears. Muyan's brows slowly wrinkle. No one had managed to grow the dark cloud spirit flower for thousands of years, so it wouldn't be easy to succeed. Suddenly, a thought flashed through her mind. A so-called Shen musician is a musician who is like a god. Not only could they confuse people with their music, but they could also assist in battle and cultivation. It can also be used to refine medicine, refine tools, and even accelerate the growth of drafts. Muyan remembers that among the Shen musician skills, there is one that she hasn't used yet. It's called flourish. In his inherited memories, the explanation of flourishing was to give life to inanimate objects, allowing weak life to thrive. Because she had never understood the function of this skill, Muyan rarely practiced it. But at this moment, her mind moves, and the Tianmo Qin appears in her hand. The strings were gently plucked, and the melodious sound of the zither rose up in spirals under the setting sun. The air seemed to be filled with the clear fragrance of bamboo after the rain. The surrounding black-clothed men guarding Muyan all reveal an intoxicated expression. Even the handsome youth in black was slightly taken aback. The black soil seemed to have been nourished by the sound of the zither. Little green sprouts broke through the soil and gently shook their branches, as if saying, just a little more of this kind of zither music. Flourishing was indeed used to accelerate the growth of spiritual plants. However, one song passed. The other drafts in the medicine garden are all verdant and lush. Just by looking at those swaying branches, you can feel their joy. However, only the seed of the dark cloud spirit flower that Muyan had personally planted still had no reaction. For a moment, Muyan is a little depressed. She looked up at the sky and saw that it was already dusk. She turned around and walked towards the gate of the courtyard. However, before she could step out of the courtyard, the black-robed youth had appeared in front of her like a ghost, blocking her way. His lordship has ordered that before the dark cloud spirit flower blooms, Miss Jun cannot leave this place. Muyan narrowed her eyes, her gaze carrying a bit of danger. What if I insist on leaving? With that, he leisurely continued to walk out. The black-clothed youth hurriedly reached out to grab it. However, what caused her expression to change was the figure that was just in front of her. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared like the moon in the water. His hand only managed to grab a corner of her clothes. Seeing that Muyan was about to leave, the black-clothed youth's expression turned cold, but he didn't panic. Chapter 307. This breath is completely different from mysterious energy, but it has a terrifying pressure. The icy cold air seems to have substance as it pervades Muyan's entire body, blocking her way. The black-clothed youngster's hand also clasps Muyan's shoulder, trying in vain to drag her back to the courtyard. Muyan's eyes sink. Her figure slightly crouches, and with a turn, she clasps the youngster's wrist with one hand. Just as she's about to fight back, Her movements suddenly stop. Muyan blinks, unblinkingly looking at the youngster in front of her, her expression very strange. The black-clothed youngster is about to fight back. But he sees the bewitchingly beautiful girl in front of him curl up her lips, revealing a lazy evil smile. Suddenly, her whole body leans forward. No. It shouldn't be said to lean forward. Instead, her whole body crashes into the youngster's embrace. The black-clothed youngster suddenly panics, so his movements are a beat slower. The next moment, Muyan has already grabbed him by the collar, and is pressed against the wall. Because of the angle. The two are almost the same height. Muyan moves closer to look at his handsome face, and with an evil smile, she reaches out to touch the youngster's chin. She chuckles. "Beauty, what's your name?" The black-clothed youngster's face flushes red all of a sudden. "Jun. Miss Jun, please conduct yourself." Muyan's smile becomes even more languid and charming, "and if I don't?" Saying that, she touches the youngster's smooth chin a couple of times. Oh, it feels really good. The black-clothed youngster's indifferent face is almost about to split open. She reaches out to push him away, but because the two are really too close, he's afraid of hurting Muyan. For a moment, that handsome and indifferent face unexpectedly carries a trace of fear. "Want me to let you go?" Muyan smiles like a little fox. "Then why don't you tell me your name first? If I don't know the beauty's name today, I will definitely be unable to sleep all night." The black-clothed youngster bites his lip and doesn't speak. Muyan hooks up her lips again, and the smile on her bright and beautiful face becomes even more devilish. "Don't want to say? That's fine. I see that your figure is also pretty good. How about you consider being my model? I can help you draw a portrait, the kind without clothes, and I guarantee that it will satisfy you." The black-clothed youngster is dumbfounded. The calmness and indifference on his face could no longer be maintained. "You, as a woman, how can you do this? So what?" The black-clothed youngster grits his teeth. "You are Jun Shong's woman, how can you be like this, like this?" Mu-Yang frowns, seeming to be in a bit of a dilemma. "But I like your style more, beauty. In my opinion, why don't you just submit to me?" Bang! The black-clothed youth's entire face seemed to be burning up. No matter which continent of the 3 dimensions it was, anyone who knew her identity and sensed her icy cold and murderous aura would be afraid and avoid her. He had never seen a woman like this Miss Jun in front of him, so bold, so absurd. Unfortunately, this is the person that Jun Shong places at the apex of his heart. No matter what, he couldn't hurt her. For a moment, he was in a dilemma. His heart was filled with panic and helplessness that he had never felt before. Unfortunately, Muyan's hand still touches his lapel, her voice full of eagerness. "You won't tell me your name, so you want me to draw for you? This is a good choice. I also prefer to draw for you, without clothes." "Yingmai. My name is Yingmai." Chapter 308. Yingmai. Mu-Yang repeats, her smile bright and beautiful. "The person is beautiful, and the name is pleasant to hear. You really won't consider entering my painting? I promise that I can perfectly present your beauty." Saying that, her hand makes a motion to touch Yingmai's chest. Yingmai's face changes, no longer caring if it will hurt her. He grabs hold of her messy hand, and abruptly flips over. The two people's postures are immediately reversed. Mu-Yang is pressed against the wall, and Yingmai is looking down at her. The most ambiguous and thought-provoking thing is that Mu-Yang's hands are still pressed on both sides of her head. Yingmai looks down at her, as if he will kiss her at any moment. The air stagnates for a breath. Yingmai suddenly comes back to his senses, and is about to release the person. But he hears a deep and cold voice suddenly coming from behind him. "You, what are you doing?" Yingmai suddenly turns around, and the moment he sees Di Mingju, his complexion abruptly turns white, and he bends down on one knee, paying respects to Jun Shong. Di Mingju walks towards the two of them step by step. But he doesn't look at Yingmai, instead, he stares unblinkingly at Mu-Yang. Han Yi, who is following behind Di Mingju, is already dumbfounded. His body can't help but want to tremble because of fear. God, what did he just see? Yingmai and Miss Jun. Heavens! Let's strike him to death with a huge thunder. Is Yingmai crazy? It's fine to like other women, but his actually involved with Miss June, isn't this just seeking his own death? Di Mingju's footsteps finally stop just half a meter away from Mu Yang. Under the setting sun, the man's face is so handsome that it doesn't resemble a mortal's. But there's not the slightest hint of expression on his face. Then, he asks again what he just said. You, what are you doing? Yingmai lowers his head, his complexion deathly pale. He hoarsely says, Yingmai has done something wrong, please punish me, Jun Shong. Di Mingju's expression still doesn't change, and he only says indifferently, go to the purgatory pool by yourself for a month. Hearing this punishment, Han Yi's complexion goes white. Yingmai seems to be relieved, and he lowers his head, yes, Jun Shong. Saying that, he gets up to leave. Wait a minute. Mu Yang, who had not spoken all this time, chuckled and blocked Yingmai's way. She looks at Di Mingju with a smile that isn't a smile, but the smile doesn't reach the bottom of her eyes. I was the one who forced Yingmai. If you want to punish someone, you should punish me. What does it have to do with Yingmai? The darkness in the depths of Di Mingju's eyes suddenly engulfs like a storm. The low pressure around him simply makes Han Yi shiver, itching to escape immediately. You like shadow charms? Di Mingju steps forward and clasps her waist. His voice is practically carrying a murderous intent as it jumps out from between his lips and teeth. The man's blazing breath hits her face, making Muyan momentarily uncomfortable. She wants to struggle, but Di Mingju only tightens his grip. Tell me, do you like shadow charms? Mu Yang wanted to say so what if I like it, but when she saw the man's eyes, she coughed and said, I naturally like the shadow demon. I like him in my painting. Painting. The cold air surrounding Di Mingju suddenly disappears. It turns out that Muyan had also regarded Yingmai as a model for her portrait. But when he thinks that this woman is actually going to paint other people's half-finished paintings, his teeth itch in anger. You like Yingmai's appearance? Muyan blinks. What's wrong with this appearance? A young and inexperienced handsome young man. How charming is he? How likable is he? Chapter 309. The man approaches inch by inch, his thin lips almost sticking to her earlobe as he speaks. From Muyan's angle, she can still see the man's sexy collarbone. And the line that extends into the neckline. Muyan swallows. You are still alright. This man is actually using a pretty boy trick. Shameless. Di Mingju comes a little closer. Only alright? Muyan is about to nod, but her body has already soared into the air. Di Mingju actually puts her on his shoulder, and strides towards the courtyard. Muyan is dumbfounded. She didn't expect that Di Mingju would actually make this move. Di Mingju, what are you doing? Put me down. Di Mingju hooks up the corner of his lips, revealing an evil smile. I'll let you take a good look at whether I'm alright or not. Yingmai and Han Yi, one by one, are dumbstruck. This is the first time they've seen their Jun Shong show such an expression. So vivid, so real. Moreover, Jun Shong is actually smiling. Jun Shong. Yingmai subconsciously calls out, Purgatory Pool. The Purgatory Pool can only be opened with Di Mingju's order. Di Mingju coldly says, go prepare the brush, ink, paper, and inkstone, and bring them to the room. Saying that, he doesn't wait for Yingmai to react, and has already carried Muyan away. In the distance, the sound of two people bickering can still be heard. I think you didn't look carefully enough yesterday, that's why you felt that Ben Jun wasn't charming enough. I was wrong. Jun Shongdaran, you are the most handsome, the most confident, the most charming. So, there's no need to look anymore. Ben Jun thinks that it's better to look. Di Mingju, don't go too far. I want to go back and see Xiaobao. I'll discipline our son for the next few days. An affectionate mother will spoil her son. Don't make trouble. I'm making trouble. Wait, who's talking to you about our son? Bang. There's a loud noise, and the door to the room is closed. Han Yi and Yingmai are still shocked by that sound, staring blankly. After a long while, Yingmai turns to leave. Wait, Yingmai, what are you going to do? Purgatory Pool. Yingmai said concisely, only spitting out 3 words. Are you stupid? Han Yi promptly pulls him back. Jun Shong's meaning is clearly that you don't need to go to the purgatory pool. Otherwise, why wouldn't he even give you the token to open the purgatory pool? Ying Mai was startled, then shook his head. This is Jun Shong's order. Jun Shong's order is for you to send a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone to the room. Han Yi has a look of exasperation at Iron for failing to meet his expectations. You blockhead, don't you understand? Juanshang has changed his orders and will not punish you. If they were really punished and angered Miss Muyan, I'm afraid that even Jun Shong wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. From start to finish, Jun Shong has been completely eaten by Miss Muyan. Of course, he didn't dare to say these treasonous words out loud. Ying Mai, on the other hand, was stunned for a good while before muttering, this is the first time Jun Shong has overturned his own orders. Han Yi smiles unperturbed, what's wrong with that? As long as it involves Miss Muyan, all of Jun Shong's actions cannot be inferred with common sense. In the future, you will see many more strange things. Ying Mai gazes in the direction that the two people had just left, and that beautiful face with a sweet and charming smile appears in his mind. How could there be a woman who could live as carefree and unrestrained as she is, so audacious? However, that smiling face is so brilliant and dazzling that people can't take their eyes off it. Ying Mai lowers his head and holds his wrist, his eyes slightly flickering. Chapter 310. Bang! As soon as the door closes, Di Mingju loosens his grip and Mu Yang immediately jumps down from his shoulder. Rubbing his aching waist, he glared at the instigator of all this. She sees Di Mingju spread his hands, using his deep magnetic voice to say, "Come here, help me undress." Cough, cough, cough. Muyan almost choked on her own saliva. Are you kidding me? There's no change on Di Mingju's face, his expression still cold. That pair of deep eyes slightly narrowed. Don't you like to draw naked handsome men? If you don't take off my clothes, how can I satisfy you? Cough, cough, cough. Muyan coughs even more violently this time. It had only been 1 or 2 months since they last met, but this fellow was becoming more and more shameless and shameless. At this moment, someone knocked on the door. Muyan breathes a sigh of relief. At this time, she really doesn't know how to face Di Mingju. The atmosphere was too strange. The door opened, and Ying Mai came in with a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone. When Mu Yang sees this frosty and beautiful youth, she habitually teases him a few words. But before she could speak, Ying Mai quickly put down the things in her hands and rushed out like lightning. That back view could even be said to be in a sorry state. Muyan wants to stretch out her hand to flirt with the beauty, but halfway through, her expression suddenly becomes somewhat sluggish. Just as he was about to speak, he felt his waist tighten, and he was pulled into a blazing embrace. Di Mingju lowers his head to look at her. Ben Jun is right in front of you. You still have the mind to look at other men? Muyan chuckles, returning to her usual languid self. With beauties in front of me, even if there are 2 more, I wouldn't mind looking at them a bit more. Di Mingju really wishes that he could ruthlessly block up this annoying little mouth. Let's see how she's going to say something to piss me off. What did you mean when you said that you would discipline Lil Bao? Di Mingju leans over slightly, looking into her eyes. Ben Jun said that sooner or later, you will be Ben Jun's wife. Xiao Bao is naturally my son. If I don't teach my son, who will? Don't mention Xiao Bao's biological father to me. Di Mingju gnashes his teeth. No matter how much you love him, he is already dead. From now on, the man in Muyan's life will only be Ben Jun. The man's deep and husky voice rang in her ears like he was swearing an oath. At the same time, it was like a heavy blow to the bottom of his heart. Muyan's expression becomes absent-minded for a moment. I guarantee that I will teach that little fellow to be even more outstanding. I will not let anyone bully him. The prerequisite is that you stay here and help me plant the dark cloud spirit flower. Mu Yang bites her lip, slightly frowning in silence. She speculates that the dark cloud spirit flower might have some important use for Di Mingju. But no one had been able to successfully cultivate the dark cloud spirit flower for thousands of years. What made him think that he could cultivate it? Moreover, what if it couldn't be cultivated? Wouldn't she never be able to see Xiao Bao? Although she knew that Xiaobao would be fine, she missed her baby dearly after not seeing him for just a day. However, Mu Yang also knows that Xiaobao has an immortal physique. His talent has already far surpassed the entire Yanwu continent. There was no way he could really make Xiaobao grow up on his own. And this man in front of her, who has come from a world beyond the sky, might be the best candidate to teach Xiaobao, to cultivate him. Mu Yang's thoughts are flying chaotically. Chapter 3:11. When she comes back to her senses, she finds that Di Mingju has unexpectedly brought her to the front of the table. A pen was stuffed into her hand. Mu Yang stares blankly. What is he doing? An evil smile floats in Di Mingju's eyes. Don't you want to paint for Benjun? Under the candlelight, Mu Yang looks at his inhumanly handsome face, and then looks at the brush in her hand. She can't help but swallow. Do you have any thoughts for this man who is even more handsome than a devil? Just imagining it made her nose heat up. What? Mu Yan can draw for other men, but she doesn't dare to draw Benjun. You even said that Mu Yang has a guilty conscience. There's nothing I wouldn't dare to do. Mu Yang gritted her teeth, putting on a strong front but cowardly at heart. Let's draw. Just don't regret it later. If she could paint such a devilishly handsome man into her painting, she would have no regrets in this life. Painting, of course he had to paint. Whoever didn't draw was a fool. A smile flashes through Di Mingju's eyes. As long as it's for Mu Yan to see, how could Benjun regret it? After saying that, he opened his hands slightly again. He looks like he's waiting for Mu Yan to undress him. Mu Yan bites her lower lip, her peach blossom eyes gleaming in the candlelight. Her body felt like it was on fire, and even her palms were burning hot. Inexplicably, she, who was not afraid of anything, actually wanted to retreat. But when she met the man's mocking gaze, she couldn't help but sigh. Mu Yang steals her heart and reaches out to grab the man's lapel. The person who was being teased didn't even care. What was there to be shy about? His shirt was unbuttoned. The man's smooth chest and abs were completely revealed. Under the candlelight, it looked as if it had been painted with a layer of alluring honey. Mu Yan's eyes suddenly brighten, looking at the man's body in front of her. She is even somewhat fascinated. Yesterday, Di Mingju also half undressed himself and let her paint. But at that time, she was so embarrassed that she didn't even know where to look. Therefore, she could only vaguely see the man's perfect abdominal muscles and smooth and sexy lines. Now that he could see it clearly, it was as if a fire was burning in his soul. The man in front of her was a monster. She was a peerless beauty that could make everyone in the world go crazy. Mu Yang believes that if she were to use this man as a model for her portrait, she would definitely be able to create the most outstanding work in the world. Di Mingju is very close to the young girl. Naturally, he can see the infatuation in her eyes. He couldn't help but be happy and angry at the same time. What made her happy was that he was indeed attractive enough. In the Xiaoxian continent, those women who cried and shouted that they wanted to marry him were not fake. The little woman in front of him always said that she disliked him, but her body was honest. However, it was infuriating. This woman looked at her own body, and there was only pure amazement and obsession in her eyes. However, she did not have the slightest shyness or desire that a woman should have. She really thought of herself as a scene in a painting. However, so what if he was stunned and obsessed? One day, he would turn the infatuation in this little woman's eyes into an infatuation that only tolerated him. Di Mingju reaches out and gently lifts up Mu Yan's small, snow-white chin. His gaze landed on those captivating red lips. How is it? Are you satisfied with Benjuan's body? Mu Yan repeatedly nods, her pair of eyes lingering on his body. Pika, Pika. Di Mingju moves a little closer, his voice low and husky. Say, isn't Benjun the most good-looking? Mu Yan nods again. Better looking than Ying Mai. Nods. Chapter 3:12. Better looking than your guards. Of course. Better looking than Xiaobao's biological father. Mu Yang stares blankly, and her eyes regain some clarity. Di Mingju sees that when she mentions Xiaobao's biological father, he comes back to his senses. This was enough to show how much influence Xiaobao's biological father had on her. A certain ruler couldn't help but grit his teeth. He grabs Muyan's small hand and presses it against his belt. Why aren't you continuing? Muyan's gaze falls on her hand, and her fingers can't help but tremble. Because of this slight tremble, his palm could feel the smoothness and flexibility of the muscles underneath. It felt so good that it made her nose heat up. No need. That's good. If she continued to strip, she felt that she would turn into a wolf girl and pounce on the Avildor in front of her. That's it. Di Mingju raises his eyebrows in dissatisfaction, but I remember that when Mu Yang was painting those men, wasn't she completely naked? Muyan dryly laughs. How can Jun Shongdaran be compared to those common people? Even if they were to strip naked, they still can't compare to Jun Shong hugging the peeper and covering half of his face. Don't you think so? Di Mingju's face darkens. What did it mean to cover one's face with the lute? Was he a woman? Does this little woman know how to praise people? However, Muyan's face is so red that it's about to drip water. Her eyes looked at the sky and the earth, but she didn't dare to meet his eyes. Di Mingju's mood is a bit better. He loosens Mu Yang's hand and casually half leans on the couch. There is a wine cup in his hand, and he gently sips it. The man in front of her clearly had a cold expression, and there wasn't even a trace of emotion in his eyes. However, every inch of her body revealed an unparalleled sexiness and charm. Muyan composes herself, and excitedly runs to find a translucent black muslin outer garment. She loosely drapes it over Di Mingju. His perfect chest and abs were still visible. Not only did the half-covered outer garment not hide anything, but it also vividly displayed the man's demonic charm and disdain. Muyan's eyes are astonishingly bright. All the distracting thoughts in his mind disappeared without a trace. He picked up the brush and began to draw on the paper. Time passed slowly. From dusk to midnight. The figure of the man on the paper gradually became clearer. From beginning to end, Mu Yang's expression is extremely focused. Even the hunger and thirst in her stomach that made her lips peel and her face pale from exhaustion didn't distract her in the slightest. A few strands of hair hung down from his temples, contrasting with his pale complexion. Not only was she not haggard, her snow-white skin glistened like jade under the moonlight. Such a focused Mu Yang doesn't have her usual languid and evil aura. Instead, she exudes a kind of absolute beauty that is between pure and enchanting. Just looking at it made one's blood boil. It was unbearable. Di Mingju gently sips the wine in his cup. His pair of icy blue eyes were slowly dyed with a scarlet red that resembled flames. It was an extreme desire and desire. Looking at the woman he loved, he was like a wild beast, clamoring to rush out. Not far away, the girl put down her brush, and a relieved smile appeared on her face. Her originally bright and beautiful face looked as if it had been dyed with the bright moonlight. Her beauty was breathtaking. Di Mingju seems to be unable to bear it any longer. He abruptly gets up and in the blink of an eye, he's already in front of Mu Yang. Chapter 313. Before she could finish speaking, her dry lips are suddenly blocked. The man uses his blazing breath and his unique scent to plunder her breath, soaking her lips. Helping each other in difficult times, in life and death, hard to abandon. Jun Muyan, you're destined to be mine. At the end of the kiss, Muyan tenderly gasps for breath, somewhat unsteady on her feet. She grits her teeth. What are you doing? Di Mingju's voice is hoarse, paying for the painting. Muyan. Who told you to pay for a painting like this? She struggles, only to find that the man is holding her and not letting go. Muyan can't help but frown, pressing her hand on the man's chest to break free. Don't move. Di Mingju's voice is unreasonably hoarse. He grabs Muyan's slender wrist, slowly dragging it down, pressing it somewhere hard and hot. Muyan stares blankly at first, unable to react. Then her face instantly turns red, like it's burning. No matter how calm she appears, she's essentially ignorant about the matters between a man and a woman. The only experience she had was that kind of pain and suffering, like tormented days and nights. She simply doesn't want to recall it. Normally, She could still be bold enough to flirt with Mingju with a few flowery words. But when it really comes to it, there's only panic and helplessness. So much so that the unbearable pain from her memories surges into her mind, making her complexion turn a bit pale. Mingju sighs softly. Releasing her hand, he presses her into his embrace. His deep voice is a little doting, a little helpless, as he softly says, "Muyan, what should I do with you? In the end, what do I have to do for you to be willing to forget that dead man and accept my feelings?" Releasing the person in his arms, Mingju no longer lingers, and quickly turns to leave. He can't stay in this room for a moment longer. If he stays any longer, he's afraid that he'll directly take care of this little woman who worries him. Only, he wants Muyan. She's the complete Muyan. Whether it's her body, heart, or status, they should all belong to him, Mingju. For the arrival of this day, he can endure. He can wait. Of course, the price of patience is that he takes a cold shower for 2 hours. Then he leaves the courtyard and goes to Junji drugstore. In the room, Muyan picks up the portrait of a man that has already been drawn on the table, her expression slightly absent-minded. Finally, she put away the painting and entered the space. After wandering around the space for a long time, Mu Yang doesn't know where to hide this painting. In the end, Mu Yang casually took out a book and placed the folded painting inside. He slammed the book shut. Out of sight, out of mind. Lying on the bed and closing her eyes, Mu Yang seems to be able to hear the man's whisper in her ear. "Mu Yang, what should I do with you?" The night gradually deepened. In the yard outside the house, a gentle breeze blew across the quiet herb meadow. Suddenly, the soil on a certain piece of land shook slightly. Then, a light blue sprout slowly grew out at a speed visible to the naked eye. On the first day that she couldn't see Xiaobao, she missed him. The day after she couldn't see Xiaobao, she missed him. On the third day without seeing Xiaobao, she missed him. Mu Yang gently stirs the fragrant lily and lotus seed porridge with a spoon. Just a few days ago, the delicacies that made her mouth move, now she has no interest in them at all. Even though she knows that it's an equivalent exchange, even though she knows that what Mingju said is right. However, she hasn't seen her baby for so long, Mu Yang only feels dispirited. Chapter 3:14. However, the dark cloud spirit flower showed no signs of germination at all. Yesterday, she had tried everything she could think of but to no avail. What could he do today? If she couldn't plant the dark cloud spirit flower, wouldn't she never be able to see her baby? Just as he was feeling dejected, the door was suddenly pushed open. Han Yi rushes in, his mouth shouting, Miss Jun, you, quickly come out and take a look. What are you looking at?" Mu Yang lifted her eyes and glanced at him with a lack of interest. What's there to go out and see? Even if Mingju were to take off his clothes and dance erotically outside right now, she would still, in that case, she would still go out to watch. It's the dark cloud spirit flower. Dark cloud spirit flower. Han Yi gasps for breath. Because he's overly excited, his voice is incoherent. Miss Jun, the dark cloud spirit flower. It's sprouting. What? Mu Yang suddenly stands up from her seat. After staring blankly for a good while, he suddenly comes back to his senses. In the end, what did Han Yi say? The dark cloud spirit flower had sprouted? Is this for real? Wasn't there no reaction at all yesterday? On the dark green herb field, that light blue sprout was so eye-catching and beautiful. Even in such a hot early summer. The light blue stems and leaves seemed to be formed from ice crystals. Under the sunlight, one could even see the intricate patterns inside. So beautiful. Han Yi follows behind Mu Yang and comes over. He can't help but exclaim in admiration, so this is the dark cloud spirit flower. One had to know that in the 3 realms, no one had been able to cultivate the dark cloud spirit flower for 1,000 years. Even if there are many treasures in the world of Shouxian, Han Yi has never seen one. No one had been able to cultivate it in 1,000 years. But Miss Jun actually let the dark cloud spirit flower germinate. Han Yi's gaze towards Mu Yan can't help but be filled with worship. But Mu Yang slightly frowns. This was because she discovered that although the dark cloud spirit flower had sprouted, there were tiny, almost invisible black dots in the leaves. When Zhongxian sent his spiritual energy in, he could sense that those black dots were devouring the vitality of the dark cloud spirit flower. And he didn't know if it was an illusion. Mu Yang feels that the black dot is slowly increasing in size. After waiting for another quarter of an hour, Mu Yang finally confirmed it. She wasn't hallucinating. The black dot was really devouring the dark cloud spirit flower's life force. If he ignored it, it would only take half a day for this tender seedling to wither and die. According to the ancient records in the space, it wasn't that no one had been able to make the dark cloud spirit flower germinate in the past 1,000 years. However, even the budding dark cloud spirit flower would quickly wither. They wouldn't be able to hold on until the flowers bloomed and bore fruit. And if Muyan doesn't do anything, she will only follow in the footsteps of these people. After thinking for a while, she took out 3 more seeds of the dark cloud spirit flower and buried them in the soil. The Tian Mo Qin appears out of thin air. Muyan's figure turns around, her white clothes fluttering lightly as she sits down cross-legged next to the medicine field. Han Yi originally wanted to say, "The floor is cold and dirty, how could Miss Muyan sit here?" However, the melodious sound of the zither had already started. Under the sunlight, the young girl's complexion appears so focused, so dazzling, that Han Yi swallows all his words back into his stomach. He felt that at this moment, Mu Yang was awe-inspiring and otherworldly, noble and graceful, causing others to simply not dare to disturb her, nor dare to profane her. Han Yi silently swallows back the words he wants to say, and retreats to one side. Chapter 3:15. Standing at the side, Han Yi and the black-clothed guards don't feel anything. But the flowers, plants, and trees in the entire courtyard seem to be growing crazily, swaying excitedly. Then, everyone in the courtyard witnessed a miraculous scene. In just 4 hours, they have actually experienced the 4 seasons of spring, summer, autumn, and winter in this courtyard. Even Ying Mai, who was originally cultivating hard in her room, is drawn out. Because a green plant that should have withered in her room has unexpectedly regained its vitality, and even blossoms and bears fruit. Around the courtyard, everyone holds their breath. Even Ying Mai and Han Yi, 2 people who have come from the Shoshen continent and are used to seeing the world, are shocked speechless by this scene. Not to mention those black-clothed guards who are the natives of the Yenwu continent. Everyone's gaze towards Muyan is filled with shock and awe. As time goes by, the only quiet piece of soil once again slowly grows 3 blue seedlings. And that dark cloud spirit flower plant that was originally being eroded by more and more black spots, the black spots on the branches and leaves silently recede. The pale blue color slowly turning into a clear blue like the sky. Under the sunlight, the small plant emits a luster, simply too beautiful to behold. Ding dong, ding dong. The sound of the zither slowly recedes, eventually seeming to dissipate into the distant horizon. Muyan's forehead is already covered with fine beads of sweat, and her complexion is even more sickly pale. But her pair of languid and indifferent peach blossom eyes project a bright light of excitement. Because she is already convinced that the Shun musicians' flourishing skill can not only accelerate the growth of plants, but can even make the dark cloud spirit flower that hasn't bloomed for thousands of years grow. According to today's momentum, as long as she plays songs for these 4 dark cloud spirit flowers for 8 hours every day, she will most likely be able to witness the moment of a miracle. Of course, the most important thing is that once the dark cloud spirit flower is planted, she will be able to see her treasures. She slowly exhales, but still feels that her body is extremely exhausted. Muyan calms herself down, and her fingers once again place on the zither strings. A gentle and slow melody, like a soothing song to the soul, resounds. The echo recovery skill is activated. In a split second, Muyan feels a rich and mellow internal force continuously gush out from her qi si. Except for Han Yi and Ying Mai, the other black-robed guards all revealed intoxicated expressions. The profound qi in their bodies seemed to be stimulated by some kind of power, lingering around their bodies and cleansing their meridians and bodies over and over again. This feeling was too mysterious and intoxicating. At the end of the song, All the black-clothed guards still wanted to continue. Looking at Muyan, his gaze is filled with passion and longing. The girl in front of him was the famous Enchantress of medicine in Tianyuan City. Originally, they thought that the so-called Enchantress was just an undeserved reputation. Just like that divine doctor Qian Qing, these people would not put him in their eyes at all. But today, he truly witnessed Muyan's methods and personally felt the benefits brought about by the sound of the zither. Only now did they realize how wrong they were. The Enchantress, Jun Muyan, is truly worthy of being the woman that Master has taken a fancy to. Truly, too powerful. It was too special. Muyan stretches herself and stands up. The Tianmo Qin disappears between her fingers. Under the effect of echo regeneration, the profound qi that he had consumed was more or less replenished. Chapter 316. She dusts off the dust on her body and stands up. As soon as she turns around, she sees Yingmai looking at her unblinkingly. The corner of Muyan's mouth immediately hooks up, her long eyelashes like crow's feathers gently blink, overflowing with a crafty and charming light. Yingmai, if you stare at me like that, I'll misunderstand that you've already fallen in love with me. As she speaks, she's already leaning forward. That beautiful face, and a pair of sparkling smiling eyes, suddenly appear in front of Yingmai. Yingmai's iceberg-like face suddenly changes. He hastily tries to retreat, but because he doesn't have a firm footing, he falls back. Muyan reaches out to grab him. Wrapping her arms around his slender waist, she pulls him back into her embrace, chuckling, "Be careful, if you fall and hurt yourself, I'll be distressed." You. Yingmai's complexion changes again and again, but he can't speak another word. On the side, Han Yi and the black-clothed guards look even more like they've seen a ghost. Han Yi only feels as if 10,000 vicious beasts are galloping through his head. Heavens! Why didn't a lightning strike him to death? Why did he have to see this scene? Miss Muyan, whom Jun Shong only has a soft spot for, is this intimate with Yingmai, moving her hands and feet. If Jun Shong were to find out, Han Yi shudders, he really doesn't dare to think about it anymore. Miss Jun, you have to conduct yourself. You're Jun Shong's woman, even if, you can't harm Yingmai. He's so scared that he can't even speak properly. However, Muyan's smile became even more cheerful, her eyes filled with a mischievous light. Suddenly, she grabs Yingmai's collar, and gives him a chirp on his fair and tender cheek. There's a deathly silence. Han Yi's eyes go dark, and there's only one word in his mind: it's over. The black-clothed guards scramble to be the first to turn around, wishing that they had never seen this scene. On the contrary, it's the kissed Yingmai. After the initial shock and amazement, he looks at Jun Muyan, who's very close at hand. He sees the craftiness and mischief glinting in those peach blossom eyes. A thought suddenly arises in his mind. You know, Muyan chuckles. Know what? Yingmai bit her lip and didn't say anything, but she held her wrist. Mu Yang raises her eyebrows, marveling at the sharpness of the youngster in front of her. Yes, she did know the secret of the shadow charm. That day when he fought with Yingmai, her fingers inadvertently touched the youth's pulse. In the blink of an eye, everything was exposed. A man's pulse was completely different from a woman's. No matter how much Yingmai pretended to look like a man, like a beautiful youth. However, her pulse would not lie. That's right. Yingmai was not a man, but a genuine beauty. This is also the reason why Mu Yang has repeatedly taken liberties with her. Mu Yang has never seen a woman disguising as a man, and being able to do it so successfully. There was not a trace of makeup on her. His temperament is as cold as ice, and his entire body's austere aura is even more frightening and moving than Han Yi's. Do you want to know why your chest always hurts? It even affected the growth of your cultivation? Mu Yang leaned closer to Yingmai and said in a low voice. Yingmai stares blankly, and subconsciously asks, why? Mu Yang hooks up the corner of her lips, and her smile is exceptionally bewitching, because being bound for a long time is not good for your body. Chapter 317. Mu Yang's smile becomes even more brilliant. If you want to know the solution, remember to secretly come and find me at midnight tonight. The blush on Ying Mai's face deepened. She was once as cold as ice, but at this moment, she was hesitant to speak. From Han Yi's point of view, he feels that Ying Mai is blushing, she's wanting to speak with shyness and tenderness. No. It couldn't go on like this. Otherwise, if Jun Shong were to see this scene, I'm afraid that Miss Jun and Ying Mai would not be able to survive. Han Yi is about to step forward and forcibly separate the two. But she only felt a blur in front of her, and a figure unexpectedly appeared behind Mu Yang. When Mu Yan still wants to reach out to flirt with Ying Mai, he grabs her collar and pulls her into his arms. Mu Yang only feels that her body has crashed into a rock-like embrace. His shoulder hurt from the impact. As soon as he raises his head, he meets Di Mingju's pitch-black eyes. Her eyes lit up. Why are you back so early today? How is Xiaobao? Did he eat and sleep well? How is your cultivation progress? Did you miss me? Di Mingju's face is as black as the bottom of a pot. Without saying a word, he grabs Mu Yan's collar and directly drags her into the room. Hey, Di Mingju, do you know what gentleness is? Do you think it's like carrying a sack? What makes Mu Yang curious is that Di Mingju doesn't drag her back to the bedroom this time, but takes her to a special room. The kitchen. Why did Di Mingju bring her to the kitchen? His big hand pressed her down on a chair beside the dining table. Mu Yang is about to stand up, but Di Mingju coldly glares at her. Behave yourself. Mu Yang blinked her eyes. This man's anger was not small. Just what did she do to provoke him? However, he still sat down obediently. Then, she saw a scene that left her dumbfounded. She sees Di Mingju taking out a sky-blue apron from who knows where, and tosses it in front of Mu Yan. He raised his chin slightly and said proudly, "Help me put it on." His voice was very cold, and the aura around him was very disdainful and handsome. But wait. Why the hell did he want her to help him put on the apron? Apron, Di Mingju, this combination, does it also want to go up to the sky and stand shoulder to shoulder with the sun? Mu Yan is dizzy. She stands up and helps Di Mingju put on the apron. Soon after, the noble Jun Shongdaran stood in front of the stove and began to cook skillfully. Mu Yang, wait a minute. Was she really not hallucinating? Di Mingju is actually personally cooking? Mu Yang rubs her eyes, then rubs them again. However, the scene in front of him didn't change at all. Good heavens! Di Mingju is actually cooking, and is even wearing an apron to cook. The key was that this man was sitting in such an incongruous position, wearing such a feminine apron, but why did he still look so handsome and incomparably elegant? It was as if he was sitting on the throne, pacing back and forth in his own territory. Just as Mu Yang is sluggish for a moment. The fragrant dishes had already been served. Di Mingju's expression is cold and detached, even slightly frowning. He personally scoops a bowl of soup and places it in front of Mu Yan. Still not eating? Eat. Mu Yang abruptly comes back to her senses and takes a sip of the soup. The fresh and fragrant taste filled his mouth. Chapter 318. Naturally. Di Mingju snorts in disdain. Apart from Ben Jun, who else could do it? This time, Mu Yan is really stunned. You, personally cook for me? Naturally. The same answer. But, why? He's clearly a high and aloof Di Jun. The people of this Yenwu continent are obviously insignificant ants to him. Obviously, he should be revered by all the people in the world, the man that all women would flock to like ducks, madly in love with. Why would such a person wear such a ridiculous apron, wash her hands and make soup for her? Di Mingju gets a little closer to her, slowly saying, "Because, Mu Yan, the food you make is too unpalatable, it's not good for your health." The blue veins on Mu Yan's forehead suddenly bulge. This bastard. Being moved or whatever, it's really just fleeting clouds. She hooks up the corners of her lips, revealing a mocking and charming smile. "It's not good for your health. Jun Shongdaran still ate so much that day? I even thought that Jun Shongdaran was very satisfied with my cooking." Satisfied. Di Mingju's expression doesn't change. As long as it's Mu Yan's cooking, I'm satisfied. Even if I eat for a lifetime, it doesn't matter. Mu Yan stares blankly. She hears Di Mingju continue, but you and Xiao Bao can't. Your body is weak, and Xiao Bao is still a child, you can't eat those. In the future, let me eat what you cook. I'll be responsible for your meals. I said, as long as you like the chef who made these dishes, you can let him accompany you for a lifetime. Muyan stares at him in a daze, her ears ringing. For a moment, it's as if she can hear a deafening heartbeat. Her heart almost jumps out of her chest. She thinks that in this world, there might not be another person like this man in front of her. For her, he can forget his own identity, and do anything that doesn't match his identity. Muyan has a bad premonition. If Di Mingju's feelings are always this passionate and resolute, if she continues to get along with this man day and night, she will soon not be able to keep her heart. Why are you looking at me like a fool? Di Mingju slightly frowns, putting food on her plate. His movements are gentle, but his tone is somewhat unkind. Even if you want to cultivate the dark cloud spirit flower, you can't not eat. In the future, if I find out that you don't eat anything for 8 hours and only care about playing the zither, you can forget about seeing Xiaobao again. This time, it's rare that Mu Yang doesn't go against him. Instead, he silently puts the food that Di Mingju picked up into his mouth. The stir-fried dishes are fragrant and spicy, but in Muyan's mouth, she only feels a faint sourness and a faint sweetness. She sees that Di Mingju is still unceasingly putting food in her bowl. Mu Yang suddenly picks up a piece of shrimp and stuffs it into Di Mingju's mouth. Don't you want to try your own cooking? Di Mingju stares blankly, then expressionlessly chews the shrimp into his stomach. No one noticed that his ears had turned red. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Then, he coughed lightly and said, I'm hungry too. Continue to help me eat. He wouldn't say that his current body didn't need to eat any food at all. Even in the Yenwu continent, they wouldn't be hungry. Mu Yang blinked. Aren't the chopsticks right there? The man in front of him frowned, looking very unhappy. I'm tired. So tired that he doesn't even have the strength to eat. But he still has the strength to pick up a bunch of food for her. Chapter 319. Muyan rolls her eyes, but she doesn't expose this man. Then, the two of them take a bite, one bite at a time, and just like that, they eat up the food on the table. Di Mingju still looks grave and stern, but if Elder Chang were here at this time, he would be able to see it. How happy is his Junshong's heart, especially that pair of normally ice-cold blue eyes. Right now, it's almost rippling with waves. And Muyan, even she herself doesn't notice it. Her smile is still languid, bright and beautiful, but it's mixed with a hint of softness that was never there before. Late at night, a black shadow noiselessly lands in front of Mu Yang's door. The room is quiet, without the slightest sound. The figure slowly raises its head, a handsome and cold face exposed under the moonlight. It's Ying Mai. A pair of cold eyes look into the dark room, and Ying Mai's face shows a rare hint of hesitation and worry. Her hand gently presses on her flat chest, her brows lightly wrinkling. Muyan's words seem to still be ringing in her ears. It's not good for the body to be restrained for a long time. If you want to know the solution, remember to secretly come and find me at midnight tonight. However, can she really ask Muyan about this kind of thing? Ying Mai already doesn't remember how many years she's been pretending to be a man. At first, it was to avoid being hunted down by her enemies, to protect herself. Later, slowly, she has completely regarded herself as a man. She already doesn't know how to be a woman. Regarding female characteristics, she only regards them as burdensome and shameful. Therefore, since puberty, Ying Mai has used various methods to cover up these characteristics. She's ruthless to her enemies, and even more ruthless to herself. If someone else were to restrain themselves like her for 10 years, perhaps they wouldn't be able to bear it long ago. But Ying Mai cultivates and fights as if nothing has happened. Even after so many years, apart from Jun Shong, whom she swore allegiance to, almost no one in the polar domain knows her identity as a woman. However, as she grows older, Ying Mai finds that her cultivation has begun to stagnate. Especially in the last 2 years, every time she cultivates, her spiritual power would circulate to her chest, and she would be in so much pain that she'd rather die. She can no longer continue. Moreover, this pain is getting more and more intense as time goes on. The old servant who had been by her side since she was young was also an extremely skilled doctor. However, even after so many years, there was no solution. Jun Muyan is only a mortal of the Yenwu continent. She doesn't even understand what cultivation and spiritual power are. Could she really solve her own problems? Yingmai's footsteps were somewhat hesitant. She felt that she was trying to find a doctor in a desperate situation. However, in all these years, Jun Muyan is the first person to see through her disguise as a man and the illness on her body. Even Fairy Lung Qingwan of the Tianyi men has met him several times. But he had never discovered his own secret. Creak in the dark, the sound of the door being opened was especially clear. Yingmai was startled and suddenly came back to her senses. Only then did she discover that the lights in the room had been turned on. The clear and melodious voice was especially clear in the silence. According to the primal chaos internal canon, the human body has 3 dantians, which are located between the eyebrows, the shanzhong point in the chest, and the guanyuan point 3 inches below the navel. Your chest has been forcefully restrained for too long, causing the shanzhong acupoint to be clogged and the middle dantian to be closed. The upper, middle, and lower dantians are blocked. Chapter 320. Hearing these words, Yingmai no longer had any doubts and knelt on the ground with a thud. Miss Jun. She bit her lips, wanting to say something to beg her to save her life, but her natural coldness and stubbornness made it impossible for her to open her mouth. In the next moment, a fragrant breeze blew past. Muyan's figure has already appeared in front of her. Her slender, jade-like hands helped her up from the ground and patted off the dust on her knees. You want me to treat your injuries? Mu Yang looks at her with a smile. Yingmai once again clenched his teeth, finally making up his mind. Bending his knees, he knelt down again. I beg Miss Jun to save me. In the future, no matter what you need Yingmai to do, even if I have to go through water and tread on fire, Yingmai will not hesitate. In fact, just by looking at Jun Shong's attitude, you can tell. Miss Jun was bound to be the future mistress of the polar domain, and also the object of her loyalty. She should be willing to go through water and tread on fire for this young girl in front of her. However, Mu Yang chuckled softly. Wu, even if I ask you to repay me with your body, you won't refuse. Hearing that, Yingmai's cheeks immediately turned red. Miss Jun, you clearly know this subordinate's identity, please don't joke around. Mu Yang sees that she can't wait to find a hole to crawl into. He couldn't help but laugh even louder. But in the end, she found her conscience and stopped teasing this thin-skinned young man. He pulled Yingmai to sit on the bed. The Tianmo Qin appears in Mu Yang's hand, then she says in a deep voice, take off all the restraints and clothes on your body, I want to examine your body first. Take off my clothes. The blush that had just faded from Yingmai's face resurfaced again. She stuttered, take it all off? This time, Mu Yang didn't tease him. Instead, she gently plucked the zither strings and lightly said, in the eyes of doctors, there is no difference between men and women. There are only sick and healthy bodies. The blockage in your dantian is too severe. It's impossible to detect it just by feeling your pulse. Therefore, I need to use music to activate the acupoints in your body and sense the extent to which your dantian is sealed. Under the candlelight, the girl's beautiful face was dyed with a trace of irresistible majesty. Yingmai subconsciously did as she was told. In a trance, she even thought that she was facing Jun Shong. Because only Jun Shong didn't need to display his might and aura to make people willingly submit to him, making them unable to go against him. One by one, the clothes on his body were taken off by Yingmai, including the band around his chest. The girl's beautiful figure is revealed in front of Muyan. However, on her fair body, one could see a patch of bruise on her chest. Contrasting with the snow-white skin on other parts of the body, it was a particularly ghastly sight. Mu Yang frowned slightly. He looked at the woman in front of him with a trace of pity in his eyes. Such a little girl had been restraining her feminine characteristics for 10 years. What kind of suffering and pain must they endure every day? The sound of the zither rang out slowly, from a whisper, to a gentle flow, and then to a stormy sea. Ying Mai's expression slowly changed from shyness and indifference to pain. Beads of sweat rolled down her forehead. Her fair skin was flushed red like fire. That slender body trembled more and more violently under the candlelight. Finally, with the high and sharp sound of the zither, it surged to the climax. Ying Mai also let out a shrill cry that pierced through the night sky. She suddenly collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. After the climax, the sound of the zither gradually calmed down, until it completely disappeared. Chapter 321. It wasn't until Mu Yang came forward and draped a coat over her body that she suddenly came back to her senses. Then, Ying Mai's eyes suddenly widened. Because she realized that the pain in her chest was constantly tormenting her. At this moment, more than half of it had disappeared. Ever since the onset of her illness, she had never felt so comfortable breathing. Ying Mai abruptly sits up. Not even caring that he is currently unclothed, he heavily kowtows to Mu Yang 3 times. He opened his mouth to speak, but his voice seemed to be stuck in his throat. No matter how much he expressed his gratitude, it would all be futile and powerless in the face of such great kindness. She only knows that from now on, her life is not only Jun Shong's, but also Miss June. On the contrary, Mu Yan smiles lightly, your treatment is only 1/10 complete. From now on, you will have to receive my zither treatment every few days. In addition, I'll prepare some special drafts for you. You can rub it on your chest every day before going to bed. Ying Mai's eyes are filled with gratitude. Not only did Mu Yan treat her, she also prepared drafts for her to alleviate her pain. Who knew that in the next sentence, he would hear Mu Yan say in a teasing tone, "These drafts can restore your jade rabbit to its perfect shape. It's clearly such a beautiful and alluring figure, but it's forcibly turned into a flat one. It's really a reckless waste of God's gifts. Rest assured, with the drafts that I've prepared to recuperate, I guarantee that under the premise that you won't be exposed, you'll still have a figure that would make all the women in the world envy." Ying Mai was practically running away. Without even putting on his clothes properly, he rushed out of Mu Yang's room. As soon as he rushes outside, he bumps into Han Yi, who is rushing over. "Ying Mai, did you hear a scream just now? It seemed to be coming from Miss Jun." Han Yi's voice abruptly stops. As if he's seen a ghost, he looks at the disheveled Ying Mai, then he looks at Mu Yan, who's only wearing pajamas in the room. You. In the middle of the night, a man and a woman were alone, their clothes disheveled. Ying Mai slammed the door shut, straightened his clothes, and let out a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, although she was in a hurry when she came out, she still wrapped the cloth around herself. Otherwise, she's afraid that she would have already been exposed in front of Han Yi. "I say, little shadow, don't you want to die?" Han Yi suddenly raises his voice. Ying Mai buttoned up his clothes and coldly glanced at him. His eyes were filled with disdain that said, "You're so noisy." Han Yi takes a deep breath, silently repeating 100 times in his mind, "Don't bother with this smelly brat. Do you know who Miss Jun is? That is our Jun Shong's destined daughter, the future mistress of our polar domain. Is there something wrong with your brain, or is there something wrong with you? How dare you, how dare you?" Han Yi can't continue to say the last sentence. He felt that his heart was about to be struck by lightning when he thought of the scene just now. It's as if a jealous Jun Shong Daran has appeared before his eyes, peeling off the skin and pulling out the tendons of this stinky brat before him, frying, steaming, and deep-frying him. Grabbing Ying Mai's collar, Han Yi takes a deep breath and says, "No matter what, if you still want your little life, then stay away from Miss Jun for me. Otherwise, if Jun Shong finds out, you're dead for sure." Ying Mai raised his eyebrows, his expression saying, "Are you an idiot? It was Jun Shong who told me to watch over Miss June while protecting Mu Yan. He also prevents her from escaping." Chapter 322. Han Yi is simply about to explode from anger from this brat. "Jun Shong asked you to watch over Miss Jun. He didn't ask you to. He didn't ask you to. Embezzlement. You brat, you could have taken a fancy to any woman, but you actually took a fancy to Master's woman. This wasn't stupidity, it was stupidity to the point of seeking death." Ying Mai waited for a long time but did not get to the main point. He could not help but frown. What are you trying to say? She brushed away the wrinkles on her clothes. The blush on her face faded away in the cold morning wind. If you don't have anything to say, why don't you leave now? You want me to leave? Of course. Yingmai glanced at him even more disdainfully. What if you disturb Miss Jun's sleep? Poochie. Han Yi feels that his little heart has been struck by lightning, and then ruthlessly pierced by an arrow. Yingmai, you bastard who values love over friendship. Han Yi turns around to leave, but just after taking 2 steps, he suspiciously turns his head back. Why aren't you leaving? I want to protect Miss June. Yingmai looked back calmly. Naturally I won't leave. Poochie. The second arrow pierced his heart. Han Yi staggers away, his back unspeakably bleak. After returning to his room, he tossed and turned for most of the night. It was only when the sky brightened that he abruptly sat up from his bed, his eyes shining. Yes. That's right. That brat Yingmai must have not been close to a woman for too long. That's why he was captivated by Miss June. But no matter how good Miss Jun is, she's still Jun Shong's woman. How could it be Yingmai's turn? So, the most reliable way is to bring Little Shadow out to see more women. As long as he had tasted the taste of a woman, he would know that Miss Jun was not. Alright. Even if Miss Jun is the best, you can't even think about her. There are plenty of fish in the sea. I'm sure that once Little Shadow enters that brothel, he will definitely forget about Miss Jun. Hey. In the next few days, the dark cloud spirit flower grew better and better. Muyan's mood is also getting more and more cheerful day by day, but also more and more urgent day by day. After all, it had been 5 days since she last saw her baby. However, on the 5th day of the dark cloud spirit flower's growth, a problem occurred. On this day, the dark cloud spirit flower should have bloomed. However, the flower bud grew out, but it did not bloom. When Muyan plays the Tianmo Qin, she can even feel the powerful force surging within the flower bud. However, the flower bud seemed to be bound by a layer of barrier. He couldn't break through with just his zither music and flourishing. Mu Yang didn't know what that barrier was, and how to break through it. For a moment, her heart was incomparably impatient. One had to know that the life cycle of the dark cloud spirit flower was only 7 days. Every day, it had to grow to a new stage. Otherwise, after today, before the flowers bloomed, the 5 dark cloud spirit flowers would all wither. But how could he break the barrier outside the flower bud? Following beside Muyan, Yingmai sees her frowning. She, who has never liked to talk, couldn't help but open her mouth. Miss Jun, is there anything I can help you with? Mu Yang turns to look at her and ponders for a while. Suddenly, she has a flash of inspiration. The birthplace of the dark cloud spirit flower is not in the Yenwu continent, but in the Xiuzhen continent. There's only internal force in the Yenwu continent, not spiritual energy. The dark cloud spirit flower is unable to bloom. Is it because she's using mysterious energy to play the Tianmo Qin? Chapter 323. Mu Yang quickly pulls Yingmai over and teaches her how to pluck the strings. Furthermore, he asked her to use her spiritual power while plucking the strings. Then, the sound of the zither rises, but the Tianmo Qin doesn't have any internal force or spiritual power aroused, and the dark cloud spirit flower naturally doesn't respond. Yingmai lowered her head in shame. Miss Jun, I'm sorry, I couldn't help you. It's not because spiritual power can't be used in the Yenwu continent. A small amount of spiritual power can still be used. But this Tianmo Qin in front of him doesn't seem to be something that anyone can use. When Muyan plays, a unique energy overflows from the Tianmo Qin. But when Yingmai moved it, it was just a dead object, without any reaction. Mu Yang also thought of this. Apart from her and Xiao Bao, this Tianmo Qin seems to be the most ordinary broken zither in the hands of anyone else. He couldn't unleash any power at all. But Yingmai suddenly hesitates. Miss Jun, perhaps you can try it with Jun Shong. On the Xiuzhen continent, no matter what kind of spirit tool it doesn't matter who it is, Lord can control it. He seems to have a natural affinity with those spiritual objects. As she heads to Di Mingju's room to look for someone, Muyan's mind is still echoing with Yingmai's words. It had a natural affinity with Fays. This description reminded her of Xiao Bao. It was the same for her treasures. They had a natural affinity with spiritual items, magical treasures, and strange beasts. That's why, no matter which deep mountain, wild forest, or secret territory he enters, he would be able to sense the location of the most precious draft at the first instant. Defying unexpectedly also has this kind of talent. Oh! In that case, he could be considered to be qualified to teach little Bao. Muyan is immensely proud of herself as she thinks about her darling's fierceness, when she suddenly hears the voices of two maids. There were maids and guards in the courtyard. But usually, they only did some cleaning and guard work. Even if it's Ying Mai and Han Yi's room, they're not allowed to enter at will. Defying's room is cleaned by Han Yi. And Muyan's room is cleaned by Ying Mai. Have you heard? Shixianzi is coming here. Shixianzi? Which fairy sha? It can't be the one in Ghost City. Other than that person, who else has the qualifications to be called Shixianzi? You should know that this person was personally invited by our master. I thought that master had only personally invited that Enchantress June. The Enchantress is naturally extremely powerful, but if she wants to be mentioned in the same breath as Shixianzi, I'm afraid she's still far off. Ghost City's Shixianzi? Which fairy sha? Defying invited people over. Muyan's footsteps stop in front of Defying's door, unconsciously listening to the conversation between the two. Regarding this Shixianzi, a name surfaced in her mind, and she wanted to verify it. However, before the two maids could say anything, the door to the room creaked open. Defying's handsome face appears in front of her, his eyes staring unblinkingly at her. What are you doing standing outside? He paced back and forth in anticipation, waiting for Mu Yang to take the initiative to push open the door and enter his room. However, this woman stood outside for so long and refused to come in. Defying really can't wait any longer, he can only push the door open and come out himself. As soon as the two maids see Defying coming out, they simultaneously kneel down, their faces red with shame. Even though she knew how mysterious and unreachable her master was. Chapter 324. But every time they see that man's handsome face, that disdainful aura, it still makes their hearts thump, wishing that they could jump out of their mouths. Mu Yang sees the two little girls acting like this, and she can't help but feel disappointed that it's impossible for her to continue gossiping. I want to ask you for a favor. She pulls back her thoughts and explains her purpose. Defying's heart skips a beat. This is the first time that Mu Yang has taken the initiative to ask him for help. But on the surface, there's still a cold look, and he only lightly spits out a word, okay. Mu Yang stares blankly. You're not going to ask me what kind of favor? Defying snorts, glaring at her with dissatisfaction. Could it be that in your eyes, Ben Jun can't even help you with a small favor? Mu Yang, Jun Shongdaran, isn't your focus wrong? Seeing Defying place his slender hands on the Tianmo Qin, Mu Yang can't help but feel nervous. Can the Tianmo Qin really approve of other people besides her and Xiao Bao? Moreover, will Defying discover the abnormality of the Tianmo Qin? In the Yanwu continent, the zithers of ordinary musicians are also made from special spiritual objects. Just like the weapons in the hands of martial artists, they can react to internal force. But how can those zithers be compared to the Tianmo Qin? Defying curls his fingers, as if he's going to play. But suddenly, he stops and turns to look at Mu Yang. Ben Jun doesn't understand music theory, you come and personally teach me. Mu Yang stares blankly, don't understand music theory? But just plucking the strings and stimulating spiritual power, there's no need to understand music theory at all. But facing Defying's stubborn eyes, Mu Yang still compromises. Who told her to ask Defying for help? 5 slender fingers, as fair as jade, press on the back of Defying's hand. Mu Yang's fingertips tremble uncontrollably. The man's hands are very beautiful. Slender, fair, with distinct joints, like a work of art carved from fine jade. But when Mu Yang's beautiful little hands, which seem to be shrouded in luster, are overlapped with his, she can clearly feel the difference between a man and a woman. Mu Yang usually doesn't blush when she teases Defying. At this moment, looking at the 2 pairs of crossed hands, She could only feel her heart beating faster and her ears turning red. But right at this moment, Mingju tilts his head and slowly breathes into her ear. Still not going to start? The man's sexy aura assaulted her senses. Mu Yang's finger trembles again, and it slides between Mingju's fingers. The two people's hands almost become entwined with each other's. She promptly gathers her mind and takes a deep breath. She gently plucks the zither strings with Mingju's fingers. The sound of the zither rose up in spirals. It was a little messy and a little sobbing. But it was indescribably beautiful. The man and woman snuggling together looked so beautiful under the sun. It was as if they were a match made in heaven. When Yingmai saw this scene, she turned her head away in embarrassment, but her eyes revealed a trace of a happy smile. After being alone for so long, it was great that his master could find someone he loved. The person master was looking for was actually Miss June. This was simply too great. Han Yi, who just came in from outside the courtyard, sees this scene, but he doesn't see Yingmai's expression. Thus, he automatically and spontaneously understood that Yingmai saw the intimacy between Jun Shong and Miss Mu Yang. She sadly turned her head away, unwilling to take another look. Han Yi clenches his fists, becoming more determined. Tonight, he will take Little Shadow to see the world. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.